Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the 5 worst, very worst Mahler conductors. Now, when we talk about Mahler conductors, we sort of have to play a game of averages for most of them. Some of them only did one Mahler cycle or a few Mahler performances and did them horrendously. But most of them claimed to be Mahler specialists and did lots of Mahler recordings. And of course, occasionally one of them may have been excellent. You know, it's always possible that you can hit a home run on a good day, but their average is horrible. And that's what we need to talk about. Because when I mean a bad conductor, I mean somebody who pretends to have an affinity for the music, but in reality is just crapping all over it, as I mentioned in connection with Marcus Poschner's recent Mahler Second Symphony. See, he can't be on the list because he's only done one symphony. So he has time to destroy all the others, and then maybe we'll have to revisit the list. Same thing with Semyon Bychkov. You know, everybody says that, well, you know, there's a cycle coming out. And I've ordered it, actually, but I haven't received it yet. And so I haven't had a chance to listen to all of the other ones. And 2 of them were pretty good. 1 and 4 weren't bad. 2 and 3 were, 2 was okay. 3 was lousy. You know, I mean, 5, forget it. So, you know, we have to wait and see whether they make the list. Oh, gosh, but the choices, we have such a rich fund of Mahlerian mediocrity and ineptitude to choose from. So here is my list of the 5 worst Mahler conductors. You may make your own list, if you please. However, and this is a however, there are some names that are verboten from the list, no matter what. They include Leonard Bernstein, Bernhard Haitink, Georg Schulte, Raphael Kobelik. If any of those people show up on your lists are getting deleted because you're not serious. You don't understand Mahler. It's that simple. It really is. You know, sometimes you just have to be dogmatic about these things, and this is one of those times. You know, you've got to be a little bit thoughtful and don't just pop out names because you're trying to be provocative. The only provocative guy around here is me, let's face it. So, here we go. The 5 worst Mahler conductors. First, Osmo Vänskä. For sure. I had such high hopes for this cycle. Because I like Osmo Vänskä. He's a fine conductor, and you know, the Minnesota Orchestra is a really, really good band, but he just blew it. Of course, he did a great 8th. Everyone does a great something. Yeah, like I said, his 8th is terrific, but the others, oh my gosh. You know, the problem with Vänskä is that he turned into this weird kind of prettified, micromanaging creature from the pit when he got to Minnesota. He did it with Sibelius and messed up his reputation in Sibelius, and he did it in Mahler, just playing very well, very prettified, lots of little meaningless details emphasized for no reason. His trademark super duper pianissimo on display everywhere, whether Mahler asks for it or not. I mean, the result is just anodyne. It's so unexciting and inexpressive, and I just don't get it. Don't get it at all. It was just an enormous disappointment. So after Osmo Vänskä, Giuseppe Sinopoli. Now there's somebody who I really expected to get Mahler. You know, he was all into that late romantic decadence and craziness. But the funny thing about him is that he did remember, you may remember the way his cycle started with a 5th symphony that was quite good, with the Philharmonia, and of course, you know, all the gramophone people went nuts. But it was really a very good Mahler 5th. And everything else after that was just downhill. It was either, he became this sort of psycho chord guy, where it was all about just swimmy, swooshy texture, and this sort of crazy, almost sort of drug-induced, hallucinogenic dreamscape, as in, for example, his sixth or his ninth and some of the other ones, or it was totally bland, shockingly bland, like 2 or 3, symphonies 2 and 3. They're not terrible, but they're completely featureless. You wouldn't know that it's him. You wouldn't know that. I was almost sort of praying for the weirdness of some of his other versions. Then we came to something like the seventh, which you would think it would really appeal to him because of its sort of modernist slant and interesting harmony. But it's horribly played, and he just seemed really not to grasp what Mahler was about. It was more about him than it was about Mahler. And it's really a shame. His weird tempos. It was, I don't know. It was schizophrenic is what it was. It was alternately bizarre and boring, or bizarrely boring. So Sinopoli definitely gets on the list. Then, of course, Lorin Maazel. Lorin Maazel, it was, expressive demeanor is mostly reptilian. Cold-blooded. He's an amazing conductor, was an amazing conductor technically. He did 3 Mahler cycles. We forget. There was the original one on Sony where he spent like an hour and 45 minutes over the Third Symphony. It was interminable. There's a great recording in that series too, the 4th, with Kathleen Battle, which is absolutely marvelous. But the other stuff, I remember seeing him do the first with Vienna at Carnegie Hall. And I'll never forget, instead of offstage trumpets, he had them play with mutes. Why would you not do the offstage trumpets? Why not do it the way Mahler asked you to do it? I never quite got it. He was also a master of, diaphanous subtlety, but nothing happening at the big climaxes. Stodgy tempos, even in his first Mahler cycle, except where you were supposed to have a big climax, like at the end of the Second Symphony. That he rushed. That he just rushed through as if he didn't care. But normally speaking, he was trudgy and dull. And the Vienna Philharmonic, which was, you would think would be a wonderful orchestra in Mahler. They're actually not. They don't like to play Mahler, and they don't play it particularly well most of the time. And he had them doing exactly what he wanted, but what he wanted had only a marginal association with what Mahler was trying to express. Then he did a cycle with the New York Philharmonic that was an online thing. It was like DG Online or something. It was weird. I never heard it. I couldn't be bothered. And then he did a whole other cycle on Signum, where all of the slowness and weirdness that characterized his first cycle was magnified tenfold. It was just bizarre. I mean, really, really self-indulgent and unidiomatic and just horrible. And, that was his Mahler legacy. I find it kind of shocking. Such a brilliant, brilliant man, and talented too. But emotionally, there was something not happening there. Something didn't connect. The elevator wasn't going to the top floor, and it certainly didn't in his Mahler. Then, of course, how could we talk about bad Mahler without Simon Rattle? Now, Simon Rattle, positioned himself as a Mahler specialist with his recordings with the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, which are uniformly awful. There isn't a single performance in that cycle that's worth paying any attention to. At best, they rise to the level of mediocrity, and at worst, they're just dreadful. So then, of course, each one of them was welcomed with orgasmic effusion by Gramophone and the English musical press, because he could do no wrong. He was their poster child for, international excellence. Just like, anyway, pick your poster child. You're stuck with him. So then after he left the UK, after bankrupting Birmingham, the whole city, by the way, he wound up in Berlin, where he did some remakes. The only good thing he did in Mahler was the 10th. I mean, I think his 10th was a pretty good performance. It was a well-realized interpretation. Both of them I liked. One of them was with Bournemouth, remember, the first one. And then the second one in Berlin, which was really finely played. But everything else is just missing something. His more recent ones with Bavarian Radio, the Bavarian Radio Orchestra, well, there was a really good 9th. There were a couple good things there. Maybe finally, at an advanced age or an advanceder age, he's finally clicking with some of these pieces. I mean, I'm sure he'll be doing more. He'll be doing it till he drops dead. So, we'll get a chance to see whether late Rattle is better than early Rattle. So far, it is, actually. But that doesn't change the fact that he has established himself as a Mahlerian of absolutely certifiable incompetence. And you just don't know. We don't know what's going to happen on any given day. So he's 100% on the list. Certainly the most overrated Mahler conductor ever. I mean, no doubt about that. And last but not least, the most terrible, dreadful, atrocious, appalling, disgusting, unidiomatic waste of time in Mahler is Yevgeny Svetlanov. Oh, I love this box. This is just, I could not believe when these things came out. They are so bad. So bad. I mean, the only interesting thing is the Rondo Burlesque from the Ninth Symphony, which he plays in like 3 minutes and makes sound like the second movement of Shostakovich's 10th Symphony. That's kind of interesting. But everything else, the playing is horrible. The sonics are terrible. Just terrible. The interpretations are perverse, and not in a good way. I mean, they just don't make any sense. There seems to be no guiding intelligence behind anything this guy does here. It's really a shocker. And a fun shocker, actually. I was kind of amused by the whole thing. And I remember, I mentioned this before in connection with these performances. I was at MEDEM, the MEDEM, convention, where we did the Cannes Classical Awards and all that stuff in the south of France. And my good friend at Le Devoir in Montreal, Christophe Huss, who was then running Repertoire magazine in Paris, introduces me to this guy and says, "Oh, I want you to meet somebody." And he introduces me to this French person, and he said hello and whatnot. This is at the opening night party, and that was the year, actually. I'll never forget. It was the year that the Berlin Wall had fallen, and everybody was privatizing, and the Russian government had fallen. The Soviet Union broke apart, and the Russians, came to meet him. And they were the most obnoxious group of people you've ever seen. Well, first of all, they were all drunk all the time. But beyond that, the opening night party was sponsored, I believe, by Mexico. They always had a country who paid to, and it's for thousands of people, hundreds and hundreds of people with free liquor and a buffet, and they just formed this phalanx of Russian-speaking people, and they blocked the buffet. No one else could get to it. It was unbelievable. What a mess. Anyway, so I'm introduced to this guy, and Christoph says to me, "What do you think of the Svetlanov Mahler performances?" And I just looked at Christoph and said, "Ugh, I think they're shit. They're horrible." And Christoph said, "Well, this is the producer." I said, "Oh, thank you for introducing me." And he was, of course, terribly offended. And I said, "How could you do that? They're just horrible." He said, "I don't think so." Of course he doesn't think so. He produced them. What could I do? But they are just the worst. It's just absolutely abysmal. So there you have it, my friends. The 5 worst Mahler conductors based on the audible evidence. There isn't any question. The evidence speaks for itself. But you may have some names you wish to add. But like I said, be a little bit mindful, because if you're just there to be, crazy about it, then, well, That's why I get to curate the comments section. And I love doing it. Oh, God, it's fun. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for taking part in these. I mean, we're getting to the end. We are really getting close to the end. So hang in there. There's some fun stuff to come. And then a whole new series to follow that I think is going to be just equally enjoyable. I really do. So thanks for joining me again, and take it easy.